Snug?
Not now, Golden. This is my self-care time. Oh, hey there. Welcome to the Nerdy Photographer Podcast. I'm your host, Casey Fatchett. If you've never listened to the show before, welcome. If it's your second time listening, your return is noted. If this is your third time listening, well, I'm going to need you to do the secret handshake. In addition to providing entertaining and informative photography-related information, I also go on adventures with the crew of the Starship Fibonacci. At the moment, I'm trying to carve out a little me time since we've been running ourselves ragged for a while now.
Snug, 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 snug. Snug, 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 snug.
It wasn't a sigh. I'm controlling my breathing. Speaking of self-care and mental health, in this episode, I talk with the host of the Life of Fives podcast, Tyson Martin, about the importance of photographers keeping an eye on their mental health. That's a very important talk we have right after the break.
Snug.
Please stop.
Snug.
Okay, I'm a race car in the red now. Hey photographers, tired of spending hours culling, editing, and publishing your photos? Narrative does it all for you faster and smarter. With AI photo culling, you can quickly sort through thousands of images to find the best shots. With AI editing, you can customize edits to match your personal style effortlessly. And with publishing made simple, you can share stunning blogs with ease. Save time, stay creative, and let Narrative handle the heavy lifting. When you use the link in the episode notes to try Narrative, you get 10% off and an additional 200 credits for edits. What are you waiting for? Try Narrative today. Visit the link in the episode notes and get started for free. Hello, and welcome to the Nerdy Photographer Podcast. I'm your host, Casey Fatchett, and we're here today with Life of Fives podcast host, Tyson Martin. Tyson, welcome to the show.
Hey, Casey, thank you so much for having me on. I look forward to our conversation.
It's been a real effort to get together. We both had a lot of things coming up. Before we get into that, I'm going to roll the dice breaker. 15. Okay. Dream dinner party scenario. Who are you inviting, living or dead?
Oh, man. Geez. Who am I inviting, living or dead? I'd have to have Fred Herzog there, first and foremost. Vancouver legend, Kodachrome, amazing, captured this city like no one else. Man, I'd have to have, this is a tough one. There's just so many people.
Limited to 4. Just 4.
Limited to 4. All right. Jason Roman, Stock Easy, my homie, Devin Allen, not without question. And then everybody's going to hate me or because I forgot them, but my brother, Johnny Creative.
Johnny Edward.
Johnny Edward. Love that guy to death. Those would be the 4 that I would have to have at this party.
Still one of my favorite interviews.
Yeah, one of mine too, man. Like, I didn't realize how connected and close you could become to somebody over a conversation. But yeah, we text all the time. We're constantly promoting each other and just trying to grow together.
He's a genuinely good person.
100%.
He wants to. He worries about you, and we check in on each other as well. Like make sure that everything's good. And speaking of which, your show deals a lot with mental health.
Yes, sir.
And I think that we've touched on it in some episodes of my show. Talked about grief and creative, how that affects creativity.
Mm-hmm.
Talked about some other things. I mean, for me, mental health is a huge deal. Like, I suffer from anxiety and depression, and this is for most people, a very solitary hobby or career. And mental health is really something that photographers should give serious thought to. And I've stumbled across so many people through this show who we will have conversations. Sometimes people don't want to share it, on while it's being recorded, but things that they talk about and they feel, and I think this is something about your show that I really love. is, talking openly and honestly about struggles.
Yeah. I mean, to me, I had a very traumatic childhood. I've touched base on it on a few episodes of my show. I had a Vietnam veteran father who was he was a Jekyll and Hyde. He could be the sweetest man in the world until the doors closed. He held a gun to my head when I was like, I don't even remember, between 8 and 10, while I was trying to protect my mother, who's abusive. But you know what? That's my story. That's part of my journey. That's what made me who I am. When I started the podcast, I wanted to do something different. I really wanted to go to a place where I was comfortable. And for me, photography is my therapy. Photography saved my life, but I'm still here because of my camera, and a lot of people might hear that. And, oh, you have all these children, you have this and that. That sounds selfish. Everything I dealt with being a single dad for 10 years to 4 of my children was very stressful, very painful. Trying to figure out how I was keeping a roof over our head, selling my car, walking everywhere for 2 years, doing all these things that a parent will do when it comes to their children. Like, I had no qualms, didn't worry about it. I just did. So when I started the podcast, I was trying to think of a unique way to approach the conversation. The life of Feist. Feist stands for Photography Heals Your Soul. And then I was like, okay, well, there's obviously a connection between creativity and mental health. And then in order for me to have authentic conversations with other creatives about mental health and their struggles and the things they do to get by, I had to be open and honest with who I am. I had to seek out a therapist because I can't talk about, helping yourself through therapy if I'm not involved in that aspect.
Right.
Because that makes me a hypocrite.
Yeah. I think it's an interesting thing. Like I'm in therapy. This is my third go around of therapy in my life. And I like always am trying to combat the stigma of seeing a therapist. I grew up in the Midwest where everybody's the, stoic, silent type. Nobody talks about their problems. And still sometimes, when I will say something about like, hey, we need to talk about this to someone that, I knew growing up or whatever, like something happens and I'm like, well, let's talk about what happened. They're like, hey, I know you need to process it, but I don't need that. And it's like, okay. But yeah, like there's a lot of things. There's a lot of different aspects of mental health, whether it's therapy, self-care, medication. Some people certainly, medicate. Like, there was an article somebody wrote that I got kind of inflamed by it. It said like, photography is my antidepressant. And I was just like, and it was just said like, if you're depressed, just go out and take pictures. And there's the part of me that's like, yeah, like I get that. But for me, photography is also my job. So it is also can be at times a source of stress. And then that can make things, like more stressful. And sometimes when I'm really spiraling, and I'm thinking about, oh shit, I got to edit this now. And like that adds like another task for me to do. And I'm, that's, can make things worse. So I was kind of like, oh, like don't say it like that. Like, because some people really do need the real the pharmaceutical medication to help with their issues.
100%.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
So there's like all these different things.
Yeah.
Some people need all of it. Some people need one thing, meditation, mindfulness. That was another episode we did. I did with a photographer from England. He and I were talking about how like photography and I've done it more recently in like the last few years. We're using my like photography as a outside of work as a way to just really make myself present in the moment.
Yeah.
Because,
yeah. And I mean, there's no wrong or right way to find what works for you when it comes to your mental health. I mean, what works for me won't work for a lot of people. like right now, I'm just unpacking the bags with my therapist. And he's like, oh, this is a lot. And I'm like, we're not done. Yeah. But it's stuff that I've held on to that's caused me to have grief. So, everybody has their own way. If it's medication, my children are medicated, and that's great. I suffer from anxiety and imposter syndrome. So I am my worst critic. But when I started, like I was saying, when I started the show, it was going to be the first few episodes are very gear based, just trying to get comfortable. But as of like episode 7 or 8, it kind of switched. So I do very little gear talk, very little photography talk. What I have now is I have a comfortable platform for people to come and share their story. So I actually just want to hear the story of them, what made them do what they do now, what got them through, if they had struggles, words of wisdom, things like that. Just willing to share a true story so the people listening can actually get to know the person behind those images that they love to see.
Yeah, because that's what makes, this is something, that I deal with when talking to professional photographers and, people who really want to make a business of this. And they talk about how to market themselves. And it's so related to that. It's like, talk about like, what makes you different is you. This is why the people who are generally very successful as photographers financially, tend to be really good at marketing themselves, but they know what they do well and what they do differently from other people, and why like personal branding, like their branding, like I had this discussion on Threads a little bit the other day. I think it was Andy Adams had asked, like, as a photographer, do you consider yourself a brand? And I was like, you're a brand if you're a business. Yes. Like and like, if you're just a photographer, it's your hobby. It's something you do for fun. No, you're not a brand. If you are in it for a business, yes, you have become a brand, or you've separated it and created a brand that is under some other name. But if you're using your own name as your photography business, trust me, you're the brand, and you need to figure out what it is like your brand does. And like, that's like a sort of a psychological exercise for a lot of people, because then they can't separate themselves from the brand. And that leads to a lot of imposter syndrome and other things where the people are like really hating on themselves because they're like, oh, I don't have anything special about me, or I'm not this, or I'm not good enough to say this about myself. And it's like, no, you have to like find a couple things. Your photography business isn't about the whole of you. There are things you keep to yourself. You don't give to just the whole world as being through your business. Like, you focus on some things that you do really well and that are important to your clients. And those are some brand elements that are personal related. And yeah, but I hear so many people who like get upset with themselves and really torture themselves over feeling that they personally, because they've made the brand about them, like that they can't live up to what they need to do. And trust me, even as someone who's been doing this for 25 years and has enjoyed, a modicum of financial success at this, to where like I've always been in the black with my business for that period of time, still feel imposter syndrome all the time. It's just a matter of how far I let it go.
Yeah, exactly. I separated my personal away from the Life of Ice account. And then I made myself, I'm an entity of the Life of Ice. Yeah. I'm the host of the show. Right. And I don't look at myself as the creator or anything like that. The Feist name is an important name. That was my best friend and I created a fixed gear bicycle company called Feist. It was called Pedal Harder, You Sissy. So it was just kind of very important to us. We were young, had no money, so it wasn't going to go anywhere. So it was important to move that along, and I was able to change the acronym for it to Photography Heals Your Soul. But when I stepped myself away from it, then I come and I sit down. When I put, like, we had that issue with this cord. When I put this cord in, I'm working on the Life of Ice. That's that. When the other one is in, I'm listening to a podcast. I'm listening to music. just enjoying my life, editing photos, doing whatever. So it is super important that people realize the business doesn't define the character. Right. And that's a lot of reasons with me dealing with imposter syndrome is I listen to other podcasts and I'm like, man, mine sounds similar. You start putting yourself in that category. And then you get things you get emails like that your show's top 3% of 4 million podcasts. You're like,
what?
Oh, what the heck? And you're just trying to figure out. Then for me, that puts more pressure on me. That means I have to keep hammering. I have to keep pushing. And that put me in the hospital. So,
Yeah, you recently had a pretty big health scare. That was part of the reason that we've had a little trouble getting together. We had a scheduled time and you're like, I don't feel so good. And then the next thing I know, you posted like, I'm in the hospital. I was like, well, it's a good thing you went to the hospital and didn't sit around trying to have a conversation with me.
Yeah, it was bad, man. Like I legitimately got a 2.5 millimeter saddle sore on my inner thigh from riding my bicycle. Thought nothing of it. I've had hundreds of them in the years. I ride my bike every day. Woke up. That was on a Thursday. Friday on the ride home, I was like, man, that's really sore. They're usually not that sore. Didn't think much of it. Went home, treated it. Woke up Saturday, my fever, nauseous. And I'm like, oh, my family was sick. I got this now, So I went Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, possibly Wednesday. Things start to get a little blurry for me. On the couch, not feeling well. My son came home. He's like, Dad, you need a shower. So I was like, okay, cool. I'm going to go have a shower. Went upstairs, got ready for a shower, looked in the mirror, and I had my inner thigh, basically from my hip, about 7 inches down and 11 inches across, was just this big swollen thing that I didn't even feel. And I called my wife and I said, you got to come upstairs. So she came up and looked. She went white as a ghost. Instantly 911, called an ambulance. They didn't show up. An hour and a half we waited. Hopped in the car, got to the hospital, showed the intake nurse what I could show her with my shorts pulled up. I was in for blood work, EKG, in a private room within 30 minutes. The first few nights were touch and go. We weren't sure. Doctors were concerned I wasn't going to make it. And I mean, this is crazy to me now that I hear these stories from my wife. Is like this little sore that I've had hundreds of have never affected me. And then I was in complete isolation. I had a no contact order. My family had to gown up. I couldn't have visitors. I couldn't have friends see me. And that they moved me to another private room where, I hate to say the medical system dropped the ball, but they dropped the ball. They weren't checking my leg. They thought I was in there for an upset stomach. But I was not coherent enough to say anything. So my wife finally said, have you even checked his leg? And they're like, oh, he's here for an upset stomach. And she's like, he's got a crazy infection. That's why he's on 4 different antibiotics. And I was in that room for 5 days, basically isolated, curtains pulled, door shut, couldn't hear anything. It was lonely.
Yeah.
And then I got moved upstairs into another private room. And that's where I sat for 3 weeks.
Yeah. I mean, there are times when I went through something similar with my wife, and she had a horrible respiratory infection. And we had talked to her doctor, and she said, yeah, there's something wrong. There's something going on. And we went to the emergency room. The doctor said, hey, you need to, if this doesn't change, she had gone through a round of antibiotics already, and it wasn't getting any better, and it was just getting worse. And so her doctor said, you need to go to this hospital, to the emergency room. I already called them. Tell them you need to speak to a pulmonologist and taken care of. And this guy in the emergency room, I know, I'm just saying, I know that feeling because I always refer to him as the Andrew Dice Clay of emergency room doctors. Cause he was just we're going to run some tests on you. And finally, after we had she'd been in a negative pressure room for 5 hours. Like they knew that something was wrong and they like weren't sure what was going on. And this guy came in and he goes, yeah, I ran the tests and I'm not exactly sure what's going on, but I think what we should do is like, you should take this, round of antibiotics, go home. And we're looking at it, we're like, she's already taken that. She already took those. And he was like, I was like, can you actually read her chart and figure this? And he looked at it and he was like, man, then I don't, yeah, I guess you have, I don't know what's wrong with you. And we're like, so why don't we see the pulmonologist that her doctor originally, said we should? He's like, oh yeah, I see that's on here too. I'm going to call a pulmonologist. And I'm like, good for you, man. Like it only took us
crazy
4 or 5 hours of like, sitting here where her like blood oxygen level was at like 85, which is very low. And yeah, so I am familiar with that sort of incident. And I am glad you're feeling better.
Thank you, sir.
I was worried about you.
I was scared, man. I'm usually the tough guy who doesn't let stuff get to me. So it turned out I had a strep A staph infection. Oof. They were fighting for space. I was on all these different antibiotics for 5 days before my blood cultures came back and they could fine tune it. Once they fine tuned the antibiotic, I had instant improvement. But by this point, it had taken over my whole right leg. It was basically from hip joint down to my ankle. I think it was 17 big bags of saline, tens of thousands of milliliters of antibiotics. Yeah. At one point in the beginning, I would close my eyes. My heart rate would drop to almost nothing. I'd hallucinate and I'd wake up laughing. And my wife was like, what's going on? I was like, oh, I just had this crazy dream. She's like, you've been asleep for 2 minutes. So, I have a long road ahead of me still. I can't do any real physical activity for 4 to 6 months. I've been off work for 6 weeks with no income. So things are tight, but we're making it work. I go back to my office job on Monday. So I finally will have some income before Christmas so we can enjoy ourselves. But I want to say the whole community, there was a ton of people that stepped up and, I had to ask for help. I had to suck up my pride and be like, man, I don't know how I'm paying my mortgage, and I had a lot of people like willing to help. And for that, I'm forever grateful. All the people that reached out to me, yourself, everybody on Threads who has been a part of the community building that we've been trying to do since Threads started. It made that time bearable. So I guess what I can say to people is, don't think you're a tough guy. Don't think, oh, I've had this before. If stuff doesn't feel right, go get checked out.
Yeah. I think that speaks to a larger issue also as well. I think especially in regards to mental health, if you're having like one of the best things, like, again, we were just talking about, on my show with Dimitri Mack about like the importance of a photography community. And one of the things that, I have come to find in recent years, probably through this podcast and, social media, whatever, is finding those people that you are genuinely supportive of you. And like, if you're having trouble, you can talk to, whether it's in person, whether it's via social media or whatever, having that community and being able to say like, listen, something doesn't feel right. And I'm feeling really anxious about this or whatever. And just it's not therapy, but in some ways it's similar in that you like talking about it in some way makes the, always when you talk about the monster, it doesn't seem as undefeatable. Yeah. It becomes real and it's no longer this abstract concept in your head that you are just making bigger and bigger. Yeah. Which can be really dangerous.
One thing about the hospital being isolated, I didn't really see, I saw nurses 3 times a day, right? Like there was nobody coming in. I couldn't leave the room. So I had a 10 by 10 room, like private private room because of
the
condition.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the doctor's like, oh, you need to get up and walk. And I'm like, I do. I walk from the bed to the door into the bathroom to touch the back wall and do that like 10 times. But what else am I going to do? I'm not used to relying on people to bring me things. I'm very self-sufficient. So I wanted a coffee. In order to have a coffee, I had to text my wife at work or text my mother-in-law and be like, hey, can somebody bring me a coffee? Like, I can't even leave my room to go downstairs to get a coffee. And that really, having all of your stuff taken away, that really starts to affect you mentally, you know? And then once you start to recover enough where you're starting to think normally, you start thinking about all the what ifs. What if I didn't make it? What would have happened to my children? They look like my first wife passed away in 2017. What would happen to them? You know, my youngest boy's 19, you know, yes, considered an adult here in Canada, but that's still my baby boy.
Yeah.
Like, what's going to happen to my kids? So you really put a lot of pressure on yourself. And that's where, you know, I got to listen back to some episodes or listen to some other podcasts. I was going to have my camera brought to the hospital, but I figured I'd outshoot my room in the first 10 minutes. You know, so I started reading, I started planning for this new season of my journey, you know? So I started planning what I want from my podcast, what I want for my future as a photographer or as an artist, and then what I want for my personal life. And that's where you start to really start picking and choosing what's important and starting to put those time frames into consideration.
Yeah.
So right now I'm at home for this week. I've hammered out, I think I've got 4 or 5 episodes already edited and ready to go. I've recorded a few, and I'm just trying to, my goal was 52 episodes in the first year, which would justify 1 a week for the first year. I'm releasing episode 45 tomorrow.
I mean, you still got how many weeks?
My year actually ends in February.
Right. So I mean, I'm saying
I'll be done.
4, 7. Yeah. I mean, you're pretty close.
I'm gonna do a like Christmas kind of special thing where there's a new one probably every day, just to I have so many recorded. I might as well just do something a little bit different, and try to give something back. So I try to give back to the people that my listeners, you know, I've given away Harlow lights to listeners. Bettina LaPlante, I was able to send her a pro kit. And I've been very fortunate in everything that I've done with this podcast since February. Like, nothing I would have imagined when I first started.
I think that, you know, there's something to be said for like, you know, like the mentioning that giving back. I think that taking stock also is of where you are, what you can possibly give to others, whether it doesn't have to be like a physical thing. It's just sharing, you know, and I think this is one of the things I love about your show is people sharing their journey and how much that can mean to, I mean, it's helped me. Like, your show has helped me.
Oh, I love to hear that,
in the sense that, you know, listening to that and going like, man, I'm not alone. I'm really not. And that's
number one, man, is if I see something I like online, like while I'm on socials, I'll share it. I'm a fanboy of art. I'm a fanboy of people's work. You can call me whatever you want. I'm not offended. If somebody posts something that is a banger that stops me in my tracks, I'm going to share that so every person that I follow or that follows me can see, like, you need to check this guy or this girl, whoever it is. You need to check them out because they're putting out magic.
Right. Yeah. I'm the same way.
I do. Building community and like-minded people seems like such a foreign thing now, where, you know, growing up, I grew up in Oregon. I grew up in a family where you had to be tough. You know, men don't cry, hold your feelings down. You know, oh, you're upset. Oh, boo-hoo, tuck it in, get up, dust yourself off and get going. You know what? That lended me really good for, you know, the first 25 years of my life. It destroyed my first marriage, almost destroyed my second marriage, because I don't ask for help.
Right.
I'm very proud. I hold everything in and then I explode. That's not a way to live a life. So I've learned, my current wife is a super strong lady. She calls me on my BS, and we have the ability to communicate, which I didn't have in the past. So every day, man, I'm learning to be a better version of myself.
Communication is super important. I mean, for me, like growing up, like there was just like an expectation of perfection. That everything was going to be great, and I was an overachiever, and everything had to be right. And it's I did a million different things, and as you're saying, it serves you well for a certain amount of time. It was great for me up until I think I probably in my late 20s, maybe 30 or so, and then the wheel started coming off because I was pushing myself. You can't go at 100% all the time.
Yep.
You can't, like that. And that's a lesson that's taken me since then, over, almost 2 decades from when things started going bad to learn that, hey, you can't always be giving everything of yourself. And that's what I was trying to tell you when you were talking about like scheduling and how you're feeling burnt out about your show. And like it was getting to you, and I was like, hey man, this is one of those moments where you need to take care of yourself and like schedule appropriately. And scheduling helped me a lot. It just can, even if you know what you need to do differently, it's not implementing it is always a whole other story. And like that whole perfectionism ruined me for so many years. I think it hindered my photography career because there were things that I just never put out because I was like, it's not good enough. And I also just like would focus on things like my website. My website is not perfect. And I was constantly, instead of spending the time marketing myself or building relationships with, clients or other people, I was spending time on my website because like that was just something that could never be finished. I like gave myself this task that could never be done, at least not to what the level that I thought it was. And then, when I finally said like, you know what, I'm gonna, once I let go of that, like things changed for me dramatically. But it's what your brain can do that to you, and you set yourself up for failure, or you set yourself up for like feeling like whatever you're doing is not good enough out there. And one of the things that I have really enjoyed about the photographers of Threads community is that sharing stuff that I shot so long ago, like forever ago, and it's actually gotten me back into like looking at old stuff that I shot. And there was a moment I was talking to a friend of mine who's also hosts a podcast from Canada about movies. But we were on the phone together, and I was looking through some old photos that I had taken of flowers, and I was just like, holy shit, these are really good. And he was like, yeah, you're really good at what you do. And I was just like, yeah, but like for some reason it's just dawning on me that these photos that I took like 10 years ago why didn't I ever post them anywhere? Why didn't I put them out into the world? And I think it was because, well, I'm predominantly a wedding photographer, and I just thought, like nobody wanted to see that other stuff. And just because like Twitter and Instagram and everything else was in Facebook was all like, it has to be about your business. If it's not about your business, we don't want to see it. Like and you're going to confuse people. Like
it has to be uniform,
right?
Everything has to look the same,
right? Your Instagram, profile grid has to be color graded to the point where every image looks exactly the same. And when you look at it, it's all like uniformly colors. When people look at your, profile grid, and I was just like, I fell into that. I was just like, oh, okay, well, I can't ever share this stuff because it looks completely different from, what I normally do. And then realizing I just started a print shop. It's been a project that I've like wanted to set up for 3 years. And I just finally did it. I finally like opened it last week.
Nice. Congrats.
Thank you. But it's like, I finally just like had sat down and like, okay, I've been putting these images together into folders for years. I need to actually do the thing. So yeah. Well,
one of my biggest things when I started, like I'm still relatively new in photography. I mean, I started in 2019. And you know, I've had my successes, I've had my failures, but everybody told me in the beginning, because I don't edit. I edit how I feel the image. I don't care about it looking realistic. Whatever hits me, it's my art. I'm going to create it. But I fell into the same thing. Okay, delete all the images. Everything has to look the same.
Right.
And last year I had this moment where I realized I no longer care about people's comments. It's just me, my creativity, what I'm feeling, and I'm sharing it. You don't have to like it, but art is subjective.
Yeah.
So I see people who will post things about, oh man, I'm not getting the algorithm or the reach or this. Who cares? Imagine being in a room with 20 or 30 people staring at you, looking at your work.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, that's not enough. Really? I would love 30 people to stand in front of me.
Yeah.
And look at the work I created. I see those accounts that have 5, 6, 7, 10, 100,000 likes. That really doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, I feel like those people are just trying to get their bonus from, like, that's why they steal my content.
I saw that. I saw that. I saw you post on that. We don't even get offered the bonus in Canada.
Right. Yeah. I mean, so, I have never, I don't know what I need. I had to post a reel, like get 3 million views at the beginning of this year. And I still have not been offered the possibility of monetizing my account. So it's like, I don't understand what it is, but okay, fine. But then when I see people with, it's happened a lot in the last few months. It's happened about half a dozen times where like bigger accounts have like just flat out stolen my stuff. And I'm like, well, whatever. Like, and people go, well, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. I'm like, yeah, but they're getting paid.
Yep.
They're getting paid for my stuff. Yeah. I think that's, I don't know. Those comments, I agree with you. Like the comments, you have to grow a thicker skin, or like you have to see through what's constructive criticism and what is just somebody who wants to tear someone else down because they've got a problem. That same like $3 million view reel. I had so many comments on it, and some were like, oh, this is great, blah, 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 love it, but then there were these people who were like, oh, this is bullshit. Like real photographers don't talk like this. And I'm like, come on, there's a lot of people. There's 125,000 people who've liked this reel who would disagree with you. This seems to be a pretty universal experience. But then they would like take shots at me and say like, oh, you're a wedding photographer. You're not a real photographer. And I'm like, come shoot a wedding with me sometime. And I'll see what kind of real photographer you are. My favorite was there were a couple guys who just like decided to like make swipes at my weight.
That's my favorite.
And I'm just like, okay. I understand where you're coming from. You're like, you feel insecure. And so you need to like try to make me feel insecure to make yourself feel better.
struggle. I struggle with my appearance.
Same.
Ever since I quit athletics.
Same.
Man, I put on weight. Like I'm the biggest I've ever been right now. And when you're in the hospital and they tell you you're obese because you're 6'2", 300 pounds, that's like, you're like, what are you talking about? Like, I don't feel obese. Like you look at other people and you're like, well, I don't feel like that. But then you start thinking about it because you're in a position where your body wasn't recovering as fast as it should. Okay, I got to make some changes. And one of my changes is my health has become priority number one. Everything else, whether it's my 9-to-5 job, whether it's my podcast, photo jobs, or just taking pictures for myself, if they interfere with my health becoming better, they get put on the back burner. So I'm making those steps for myself. One thing I don't understand about society, and this goes like, I'm not a big account. Like I don't have a ton of followers. I don't really worry about it. I just put out what I love. And the people that love it back are the ones who follow me. So I see accounts like Dave Herring, he became such a great friend after his episode. He's helped me through a lot of the upturn I've had in the beginning. he gets comments that say to go kill yourself. Like, how sad of a human being do you have to be to tell another person who's doing what they love to go kill themselves? It's over a video on YouTube.
It's, dude, like I said, 25 years of this, and I still take things personally. And my wife will always say, "You've got to stop taking it personally." And I'm like, I can't. It's just who I am. Because it's me. Because that's a different thing. Like, there's a wholly different thing when you are the face of whatever. Like you had said, like you've separated it. Even when you do that, you still like it's still me. Oh, yeah. It's still my face. Like if I do a video, it's me, and all of those things, and you take it personally, and especially if like my photography business, it's my name. Like if somebody starts talking shit about my business or my work, whatever, my name's up. They're talking shit about me, and that was it's a struggle I still have, but like for my own health, it's been something that I've had to come to terms with, and everybody I think who suffers from something like that, when you take things really personally, you take comments that people have. Most of these people are just so full of shit. I had somebody telling me I wasn't a real photographer, and I always like, all right, let's see who you are. Let's see if you even post anything. Let's see if you have and 99% of them have a private account, and it's like, oh, so you're not even willing to have the guts to put anything of yourself out for public consumption, yet you're going to publicly tear somebody else down, try to but then I'll find the ones that are who have been there was one that was a photography student, and I'm like, fine, you're a photography student, but don't talk to somebody who's been doing this professionally for more than 2 decades saying that they're not a real photographer when you have zero life experience at this point. You are so young, and it's just I'm not saying you can't be good at what you do, but really, you think you are in a place to judge somebody else's journey as an artist? Hey, I don't do that. I've been doing this for I'm getting closer to 3 decades of this than anything else, and I'm not sitting there judging anyone's place in the world as an artist.
And that's the craziest thing is, how do you judge? I don't do competitions. I'm not competitive when it comes to my work. I don't judge other artists. I look at their work and I appreciate what they do. And, even if it's not my thing, because it takes courage and takes guts to put your work in front of potentially millions and millions of people. Yeah. Right. So if we own our own art, I don't get involved in camera brand problems. I don't care what you shoot with, man. Shoot with a toaster. Just have a good time.
It's a potato.
But that being said, I'm a diehard Fujifilm guy. And it's cool. I just want to be myself. I don't want anybody to be anybody but who they are.
Yeah.
Just be you. And that's the coolest thing you can do for your life, for your own mental stability, for your, your own outlook or what your plans are for the future. Because if you alter who you are as a person and you're not authentic to your own self, people can read that. Yeah. People read right through you.
Yeah. I think people's bullshit detectors, especially in recent years, have just gone through, the strength has gone through the roof. You can tell when somebody's not being themselves anymore. And I think it's one of the things that, when we talk about the brand, there's a reason that the nerdy photographer for me is totally separate from my photography business, separate from my personal life. These are all different aspects of who I am. I am authentic in each one of these areas of my life, but I don't talk to people on the nerdy photographer the way I would talk to my clients, because those are just two. I talk to you authentically, as your, potential wedding photographer or whatever you're hiring me for to do photography. But that's how I would talk differently to other photographers. Those are two different things. And I think that sometimes people it's funny because I get feedback from people going, well, you said this over here. And I'm like, I'm talking to people who are hiring a wedding photographer. It's totally different than talking to wedding photographers about what they need to do. Like they just don't seem to like be able to make those things work together and understand that you can be genuine in both things.
Yeah, the ladder has multiple rungs for a reason, right?
Yeah.
You can be authentic in different avenues.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't come on here. I sell custom off-road builds for people's outdoor rigs.
Right.
That's what I do 9 to 5. I'm 100% authentic and honest with them. You know, I'm a different person when I speak to my family, but I'm authentic with them. Just like I am when I'm on my podcast. I authentically have a great conversation with the people I'm interviewing. And it's not even an interview. It's just, you know, I just call it a conversation now. Because that's what we're doing. We're just having a conversation. We're getting to know each other. We're sharing stories. And it's been a whirlwind. You know, I started shooting photos, what is that, 5 years ago now? 6 years ago? And I thought that was going to be my focus. I'm going to be a photographer. That's what I'm going to work on. And 2 years ago, I decided I wanted to do a podcast. And it took me, almost a year and a half to get up the courage to put an episode out.
It takes a lot, man. It takes a lot to put yourself out there and to keep putting yourself out there. Because like you said before, like you start getting into the thought process of like judging yourself. And we are our own worst critics most of the time. And something, like you talking about, like, what's the worst somebody can say is, no, like to you when you ask them to like, hey, can you come and be on the show? But you can create a million worse things in your head where you're like thinking how horrible this is going to be. And they're going to think terribly of me just for asking them to, do an hour-long interview. And it's going to destroy my reputation in the industry because so-and-so like didn't like that I sent them a message through their preferred, method of communication. And I had the gall to ask them to come on my show.
But it's led me to so many great things.
Yeah. I mean,
I've been able to speak in front of photo 9-10 classes, and watch all 30 students with their eyes strictly focused on me and listening to what I say. And then them doing a photo project based on my talk to bring me back at the end of the year to see all their images in the hallway. Like that was the coolest experience I've ever had. The teacher, her name was Jen Eccles. She's become a very close friend of mine. And she's just like such a unique creature. I don't even want to, that sounds bad. A unique creature, a unique person. She just wants the kids to experience taking photos, not the exposure triangle, not worrying about shutter speed, ISO. Like, let's just shoot photos. Let's get comfortable with the camera, capture what you want to capture, and then let's talk about it.
Yeah.
It's a way that most people should learn to shoot, is just have fun with the camera. Doesn't matter if you're on auto or manual or aperture priority. None of that matters. Just get out with your camera and experience the joys of capturing beauty and moments that are not going to be there ever again.
Yeah. And here's the thing, like that while my show tends to be geared more towards professional photographers, just because like we talk about business stuff as well as, creative things and people's journeys. I think that there are lessons that everyone who enjoys photography in some way, and you should hopefully enjoy it, even if you're a professional. Otherwise, it's a pretty sad life to choose for yourself. That there are, finding the joy in it is super important. And like you said, like go out, take pictures. And if your first exposure to photography is like somebody trying to tell you all the rules and all the things you have to do, like you suddenly feel governed by that. And like you are suddenly contained. Your creativity is now contained by those rules. And I think there's something to say in the larger life that can affect that can be how much you're affected in any aspect of your life by how those original like interactions go. But when it comes to photography, if you are just starting out or someone who's just starting out and is interested in it, like give them all the freedom that you can at the beginning. And then you start to add in other things and say like, hey, you know what? If you want to like, if you are concerned about, improving your photos or getting more consistent, here's the exposure triangle. And this is how that affects things. This is how, whatever the next lesson is and the next step, if you want to continue learning, and you hopefully should, but you know what? Some people might not spend that much time on it. Like, may not, like, they're only interested in like once a month taking a picture that means something to them. It's not like a obsessive act like it is for by myself.
No, me too. I'm obsessed with it. It's my camera is with me every day. But being without it for 3 weeks was crazy.
Yeah, and the thing was, I like immediately when you said that, and you're like, I'm going to outshoot the room, and I'm like, I would have come up with some like ideas for you to limit yourself to the number of photos you can take each day, and telling a different story.
Yeah,
each day.
I have them on my cell phone. I just use my phone.
Yeah,
I was, capturing. At one point, I'd shot the pump machine for all the IVs and everything, and there was like 8 or 9 bags of stuff on there, all going into my body, and it was such a weird feeling, or the EKG machine, or the commode I had to use in a room because there was no bathroom. Like it was just all these weird experiences I've never dealt with. The embarrassing moments where you have to like call someone in to, deal with things.
Yeah.
And you're like, no, let me deal with it. I'm good. Like I can handle it. But the fact of life was I wasn't good, so I was trying to capture those moments that were real and what I was going through. And I think a lot of it I've looked back, and it's not stuff I'll probably share, but it lets me see where I was at. And you can see in the images where I was exhausted or wore out. And then as I was getting better and feeling better, there was a lot more creativity put into taking the photo of the sink or the clock. It's weird how
more hopeful.
I think so. Once, there's a couple times they told me I was going home and I was all excited.
Yeah, I remember.
And then they go, now you're here for 2 more weeks. Oh, like my family, like I miss my family, I miss my dogs. I miss my house, so in the grand scheme of things, photography has brought me everything that I have to this point. Finding photography saved my life. Finding photography brought me my podcast. My podcast allowed me to finally speak to a therapist. There's all these steps, and it's allowed me to be such how do I word it? It's allowed me to be the person I've always wanted to be.
It's allowed you to grow into the person that you wanted to be. I think that's.
I always read books in school, but I hid them because I was a football player, so we don't read books. We aren't smart. We're just going out and we're just hammering people. That's what we do.
Well, I was an all state academic football player, man. I tried to buck the trend. But
I didn't.
I think that one of I think it's important, like the growth. Like there's times when people are like, I want to be the person I want to be or whatever, and thinking of that as a separate person from who they are now. It's an evolution. And that means taking care of yourself and growing to that point. It doesn't mean you swap. There's not a magic bullet. There's no one-time thing. And I think that tends to be the mistake that I see in mental health and physical health and in photography. There's always this there's this magical thinking that there's going to be one thing that's going to happen and that's going to change everything overnight and my problem solved. There's going to be that one job. This was always the pitfall that I fell into, even for the first 10, 12 years of being a professional photographer, thinking that there's going to be a job there's going to be one job that comes along, and this was like a mental health issue as well. There's going to be one job that comes along, and it's going to solve the problems. It's going to be like a recurring thing, and it's going to like I'm not going to have to worry as much as I do, and that's going to solve all these problems, and I'm not going to be as stressed out. It's like no, like you have to do the work, and you have to develop yourself. Hey, develop. Oh, it's a photography terms. Did not. You have to develop yourself.
I fully understand what you're saying. I have the same moments. Like, okay, I buy this piece of gear. Okay, I just got to do this and this, and it's paid for. Well, I'm great at telling myself that's what I'm going to do, but when it comes to actually doing it, there's a million excuses for not doing it. Right. So it's very important to understand, like, you don't need the latest and greatest of anything. First and foremost, I've had every camera system under the sun in the last 6 years. I've thrown away thousands of dollars doing trade-ins and everything to get the same Fujifilm camera that I had in 2019. It's a weird way to look at life. Now, I don't really, I have some things that have piqued my interest recently, but for the most part, I'm okay with what I have. It takes great photos, does everything I needed to do. So while you're trying to build yourself up and be this photographer, you have to understand you don't need to spend $30,000 on gear, because the gear is just a tool on the avenue you're going after.
Yeah. I find like there are times when I'll like talk about like, oh, this is like, I would do those. This is what's in my bag for a wedding or whatever. And I would post that and like people would be like, oh man, I'm so jealous of whatever. And I'm like, that's, at that point in time, I'm like, that's 20 years of accumulating stuff and finding the things that work for me and understanding that there are things that only work for certain scenarios that I want to capture. There are things that the other people wanted, like the other gear that they wanted, they would just get it and be like, oh, this is what's popular now. I never did that because I was just like, no, these are the shots that I want to get. And then occasionally would like grab a new thing and get a new thing here. And eventually I've accumulated my kit in over 20 years. It doesn't just happen overnight. I didn't just go out and like blow through my credit cards and try to get all of this stuff.
Yep, that's the thing, man. Like people will put themselves in a position that can't be easily recovered from.
Yeah.
Putting yourself in $30,000 in credit card debt is, one, it's financially irresponsible. And two, like, if it's anything like me, your brain's telling you all I got to do is do this, this, and this, paid off easy. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's never works out that way.
I'm not saying I've always been perfect as far as the financials, but there's certainly like, that was not one of the pitfalls that I commonly made of like overspending on things. And like, I would generally only buy something if I had the money already especially if it was a big purchase. Small purchases, there's sometimes I'm like, whatever, like that's fine. But like a new camera body, I would always wait until the money was in. And that's the thing about running a business. That's if you're running a business for it, or if you're not, if it's just a hobby, I would definitely wait until you've got the money before you buy the thing. Like I have friends who would say like, oh, leverage that credit, like a certain amount. Like if you've got jobs booked that are going to come in, over X period of time, if you've already got them booked, like get the new piece of gear, especially if it's something that allows you to do new jobs, like and to add services or whatever. Like that's a whole system of thought that I don't generally agree with, but it can work. But I think that this is something that also there's a episode as we're recording this. This is the episode I just did, where we talked about how gear isn't that important in the long run. That your skill and your eye and your creativity far outweigh, whatever like thoughts that you think that the camera is doing the work. It's really funny how, and I'm sorry, I'm still talking about this, but I always see those like memes where people are like, oh, your camera must take really great pictures, whatever, and how offended photographers get by that comment. While at the same time, we're like, I got to get that new camera. And it's like,
it's so true. That comment sounds like something Scott Bourne would say.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's on mine. He's like, man, I can take a great photo of any bird with any camera. Just the best lens makes it that much nicer. Yeah. And that's with him talking about helping Olympus develop their telephoto.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, you know, there are times when gear matters or makes the photo better, but you can still take a picture. I think that's a huge hurdle. I think that mentally people need to get over.
I agree with you.
I think that's a good place. Hey, photographers, are you tired of using the same stale poses with your clients, resulting in stiff and unnatural photos? Consider using Let's Be Real prompts instead. Prompts are not just a list of poses. They're designed to help you create a more engaging, fun environment for your photo subjects, resulting in more natural and authentic images. With Nerdy Photographer's Let's Be Real prompts, you'll have a unique set of prompts for couples, weddings, families, and individuals, ensuring that you never run out of ideas. Prompts are particularly helpful for clients who are nervous or self-conscious about having their picture taken. By giving them something else to focus on, they can become more relaxed and their reactions will be more authentic and less guarded. Using Let's Be Real prompts will not only help you create more fresh and dynamic images, but it will also increase your confidence and your client's confidence in you. You'll be able to handle difficult situations and subjects with ease, resulting in more satisfied clients and a stronger photography business. So start using Let's Be Real prompts from the Nerdy Photographer today and elevate your photography to the next level. Go to nerdyphotographer.com and go to our store, or click the link in the episode notes and get started creating authentic, engaging images today. Hey there, listeners. It's time for what I like to call a little shameless self-promotion. After years of planning and trying to get this project done, I have finally launched my online print shop. Yes, you can buy prints of my photos. That way you can support a small business and the podcast at the same time. Just head over to the link in the episode notes and check it out. There are photos from Scotland, Italy, France. There's wildlife photos. There are amazing flower photos. And there are photos of the city I called home for 20 years, New York City. So many pictures to choose from, and there are more coming as I get the time to process them and edit them and get them online. You can choose from fine art prints, metallic prints, acrylic prints, and there are tons of sizes to choose from, whatever you might need. So, what are you waiting for? Bring some beauty to your walls and some inspiration to your life with a print from my fine art print shop. Just click on the link in the episode notes. Go do it. Hey. And now for my favorite part of the show. What's that say? Useless information. This is always death.
Hopefully you got some good stuff.
Tyson, did you know that there are some conspiracy theorists who believe that 300 years of history have been completely fabricated?
I do.
So you're aware of this, the phantom time hypothesis?
I am. It wipes out my whole heritage, basically. So,
yeah, there's just people who believe that the Middle Age, like there's 300 years of the Middle Ages didn't exist.
Yeah,
it was added to the calendar,
just thrown in there.
Yeah, well, it's just because like adding 300 years makes so much sense to just like, yeah, I don't know. It boggles my mind sometimes what people will believe. Though I have a feeling from listening to your show that you've seen some things. Maybe this is
I do have some things I believe in.
Yeah, like I mean, like, and now that I've seen some things here and there too. Maybe this is a topic for another episode.
You must have listened to the Johnny episode because we were talking about aliens. We were talking about I grew up believing in Sasquatch. My grandpa would tell me stories of the Montana forest that he was a logger and things, big machinery getting thrown through the camps and these weird, crazy noises. And now I live 30 minutes from the most deep, intense forest where all the Sasquatch sightings are seen in this part of British Columbia. So I'm a Sasquatch believer. I'm indigenous, so the Sasquatch is very important to our culture. Yeah.
I believe there are things that just because you haven't seen it doesn't mean it's not out there. The aliens thing, man, my question isn't whether they exist or whether there is intelligent life elsewhere in the universe. It's whether or not it has been here, is here. And I don't know. Apparently, there's shit in the ocean that that news came out while you were in the hospital. I don't know if you caught that. I
didn't. I'll have to look it up. We don't actually get the news here.
There was
on my social media, I don't get any news from anywhere. I have to watch the Canadian news, and
this was they admitted to the EUAPs were coming out of the ocean.
Yeah.
And that there was but they didn't. And at this point, I'm like, you got to show us the pictures of the aliens at this point. If you can't just keep saying this is something, you can't have these conversations and they're oh, we've got video of them rising up out of the ocean and
that's them trying to escape.
They're trying to get the hell out of here. They're
yeah,
this place is fucking weird, man.
Yeah, dude.
I
haven't. I'm gonna look that up though.
Yeah, I was that came out and it was just are you shitting me? There's been more and more of this the last few years where they've been declassifying stuff, and I'm like, okay, you just got to show. You got to show us the pictures, or don't bring it up anymore. 2, aliens. If you're here, you either need to shit or get off the pot, because this is either you get involved and help us out, or you wipe us out. It's got to be one or the other, or you leave.
No, just leave.
Yeah, you can't have not being involved. Yeah, I've had experiences where I saw as a teenager, I saw lights while I was driving that were completely, there's no explanation I can give, that had to be traveling at thousands of miles an hour, low to the ground, that there's no explanation. My mother was present at a UFO near, she didn't see it. She saw the lights, and then all of a sudden the Air Force arrived 30 minutes later. This was back in the 60s. So that's pretty fast for the Air Force to show up. And there was no, this is where she went to college, and it was behind her dorm. And there was no evidence of a crash of anything. They said, oh, no, we had a plane crash. That's why we're here. And people went out, they were gone the next day, and there was no evidence of any sort of nothing hit the ground. And she's like, that's really weird. And the news came out and interviewed all these kids who were like, what did you see? And they're like, we just saw a bunch of bright lights, and then the Air Force showed up. So yeah, I believe in some crazy shit.
I think if the aliens come down and we get a chance to hop on the spacecraft, it's
take
it just like the Flight of the Navigator.
Yeah, take that chance. Yeah.
Shout out to my homie Joey Kramer, the star of that show. Grew up with him in Vancouver.
Really?
Yeah. We went to the same high school, same neighborhood, same friends. But that's how I picture it. Cruising around.
Yeah.
I just know there's more out there. I don't preach it on people. They don't have to believe what I believe. I've just seen so much being in the backcountry of British Columbia where it's dark. There's no one around. You see a lot of weird things in the sky that you can't explain. So you hear a lot of noises you can't explain, especially when you're 200 kilometers away from the nearest road.
Yeah.
You haven't seen anybody for 2 days. So, you start to wonder.
Yeah. I've never doubted that there's something else out there. And I'm happy to have those discussions. They're not philosophical discussions. They're scientific discussions for me. There's just no way in the how large the universe is that there's not something else out there.
Exactly.
Tyson, I could go on for days talking about this. And I wanted to thank you for coming on the show.
Oh, my pleasure.
You're welcome to come back anytime. Where can people find you? Where can people find your podcast?
Podcasts on all major streaming platforms. Type in The Life of Phys, so PHYS. You'll find it on Apple, Spotify, anything that allows my RSS feed to feed it. I try to put episodes on YouTube. It's kind of hit or miss if I put them up. Threads is probably the best, at Tyson Martin or at life.of.phys for the podcast. Those and Instagram, same handles. That's the best place to find me. You have any questions on any of the guests on the podcast? You want to talk about coming on the podcast? Whatever it is, hit me up. Tyson@lifeofphys.com. I will put all those links in the episode notes. Again, Tyson.
Awesome. Thank you for being on the show.
Oh man, my pleasure. It's been great. We'll get you on the Life of Phys, and we'll switch hats here. And
welcome back. I hope you enjoyed my talk with Tyson Martin. Be sure to click on the episode notes and follow Tyson and the Life of Phys podcast on social media. That's the Life of Phys, PHYS. Great conversations on that show. And while you are in the following mode, be sure to follow The Nerdy Photographer if you didn't. Yeah, we're on a whole bunch of social media platforms. Instagram, TikTok, Threads, Reddit, and now we have a Blue Sky account at The Nerdy Photo. All one word, no underscores, dots, or dashes, at The Nerdy Photo. Feel free to tell us what you thought of this episode or any previous episode that we've put out there. Leave your photography-related questions so that we can answer them on a future episode. Or you can tell us what topics you'd like to hear covered on future episodes of the podcast. If you leave a review or tell a friend about the show, you get a gold star. So yay!
Snug.
No, I'm going back to my meditation.
Snug?
Reasons I need to meditate? I can think of a few. Until next time, everybody, stay safe and stay nerdy.
Who's that coming back to town? You better start listening. Who's your heart been beating about? You better listen.